Betrayal never arrives with a warning. It walks in with a smile. It shakes your hand. It agrees with your plans. And when the timing is perfect, when your guard is just low enough, it strikes. Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. He didn't just study betrayal. He dissected it, named its anatomy, described the way it moves through power like poison in wine, invisible until it's too late. And what he discovered was this: most people don't get betrayed because they're weak. They get betrayed because they ignore the signs, the patterns, the subtle changes in behavior that only the strategic mind can detect. That's why Machiavelli believed that the greatest mistake a ruler or any person in power could make is to trust too easily, or worse, to ignore evidence out of sentiment, because betrayal doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the people you let too close. That's why this video exists, to sharpen your instincts with the exact strategies Machiavelli gave in The Prince and Discourses on Livy. Not theory, not recycled pop psychology. Actual signs based on how real betrayal happens in politics, alliances, friendships, and even families. 3 behavioral indicators that someone is not with you, even if they claim to be. The first sign is what Machiavelli called shadow obedience. In The Prince, he describes how people in subordinate positions often feign loyalty, especially after being conquered, demoted, or absorbed into your leadership. They obey not because they respect your authority, but because they haven't yet rebuilt their power. And until then, they bow. But he warns, the injury must be done all at once, lest he recover the ability to retaliate. In other words, silence does not mean loyalty. Compliance does not mean agreement. When someone agrees with everything you say but stops contributing their own ideas, be careful. When someone once challenged you honestly, but now only echoes what you think, they may not be more loyal. They may be more strategic, laying low, waiting. Machiavelli explains this using Cesare Borgia's rule. After seizing Romagna, Cesare installed a brutal governor, let him carry out necessary cruelty, and then executed him publicly to gain the loyalty of the people. The key lesson: people fear the cunning more than the violent, and the most cunning will obey you just long enough to replace you. In your world, this shows up as the quiet colleague who always agrees in meetings but never speaks first, the friend who never critiques your decisions anymore, the partner who suddenly stops offering opinions. These are not signs of peace. These are signs of posture, people holding a position until the time to strike is safe. The second sign is over-communication without clarity. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized that true allies speak plainly, even when it's risky. But traitors? They speak often and say nothing. In Discourses, he explains how conspirators gain trust not through silence, but through excessive praise, long-winded alignment, and constant checking in. Their goal isn't to help, it's to observe, to maintain access. He wrote, "Men are less careful how they offend one who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared. For love is preserved by the link of obligation which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken whenever it is seen to conflict with self-interest." Translation: people break loyalty the moment it costs them something, and when they're preparing to break it, they'll overcorrect by flooding you with attention. They'll praise your leadership, repeat your ideas, compliment your strength. But watch closely, they say everything except where they actually stand. They give no friction, no tension, no visible will of their own. That is not support. That is surveillance. And if you don't recognize this, you'll confuse proximity for protection. But Machiavelli knew the truth. Proximity increases threat, not reduces it, because it's not your enemies who betray you. It's the ones who know where you sleep, where your guard is lowest, where your attention is divided. This is why, in The Prince, he advises that rulers keep power dispersed, never letting any one advisor or soldier hold too much favor or familiarity. Because the more they depend on you, the less likely they are to betray. But the moment they become irreplaceable, They begin calculating your weakness. This applies today more than ever. The co-founder who suddenly praises every idea you pitch but hasn't taken initiative in weeks. The friend who texts you daily but dodges real emotional accountability. The employee who flatters often but leaves things vague. These are not signs of loyalty. They are signs of distraction masking delay. People staying close just long enough to act when you're not watching. And the third sign? It's harder to spot because it comes disguised as growth. It's misaligned evolution. Here's what Machiavelli observed. People don't often betray you out of hatred. They betray you because their direction changed, and you didn't notice. In discourses, he explains how political factions, once aligned under a single cause, eventually fracture, not from infighting, but from divergence. When the cause is no longer shared, loyalty decays into competition. So when someone around you starts growing rapidly, but their growth is disconnected from yours, pay attention. Not because growth is bad, but because evolution without mutual direction breeds conflict. The most dangerous betrayal isn't personal, it's structural. Two people once aligned in vision, but now one wants something the other doesn't see. And instead of addressing it, they pretend. They smile, they show up, but behind the scenes they are building a future that doesn't include you. This is how kingdoms fall. Not from rebellion, but from quiet realignment of those who once shared your cause. So ask yourself, who around you is growing in a direction you don't understand? Who's building something separate but hasn't spoken about it? Who's suddenly ambitious but vague? That's not distance, that's drift. And Machiavelli would say, drift is where betrayal takes root. Power doesn't vanish in a moment. It erodes. And betrayal is not one act. It's a buildup of signs you chose not to see. Machiavelli didn't believe in paranoia. He believed in pattern recognition. In The Prince, he wasn't warning rulers to suspect everyone. He was training them to identify slow betrayal, the kind that hides behind routine. The kind that becomes visible only when you're ruthless enough to look. And this is where most people fail. They wait for the betrayal to become obvious, for the backstabbing, the stolen opportunity, the moment someone finally crosses the line. But Machiavelli would say, if you wait until the betrayal is visible to act, you've already lost. Let's go deeper into these signs and how to weaponize them. Take shadow obedience, the first sign. The one who once pushed back, but now simply echoes you. The one who no longer brings new ideas, only agrees with yours. This feels like support. It isn't. It's a performance. Machiavelli understood this from watching how courts operated. He knew that when someone suddenly stops being difficult, it's not because they've changed. It's because they've calculated. When criticism disappears, it usually means loyalty did too. But now they're playing for time, waiting for leverage, and the longer you let it continue, the more comfortable they get in your shadow. The solution? You test them. In The Prince, he advised rulers to introduce disruption, provoke discomfort, announce a shift in direction, and then watch. If someone is genuinely aligned with your cause, they'll adapt or question you out of principle. If they're just mirroring you, they'll flinch, they'll panic, they'll hesitate, not because they care, but because they didn't see it coming, and now their script doesn't work. This is how you flush out shadow obedience. Introduce pressure that demands true alignment, not fake agreement, real skin in the game. Now look at the second sign, over-communication without clarity. This is one of the most effective camouflage techniques traitors use. They stay close to you, they flood you with attention. They show up, they smile, they praise. But there's nothing behind the words. You'll notice a strange emptiness in their communication, like they're saying a lot, but never actually committing to anything. Machiavelli saw this behavior in diplomats and advisors. In his letters, he notes how people often feigned closeness with rulers to gather intelligence, not to serve. Their loyalty was a costume, and the easiest way to spot it was this: they never took risks. Real loyalty makes itself visible through action, through disagreement, through vulnerability. But the betrayer never risks anything. They just orbit, they gather, they wait. So how do you expose them? You ask for commitment, not in words, in action. Give them responsibility. Ask for a real contribution. See if they step up or stall. Machiavelli wrote, "A man will sooner forget the death of his father than the loss of his inheritance." What he meant was this: people protect what matters to them. If someone keeps avoiding stakes, it means they have no intention of staying. Or worse, they're already committed elsewhere. Now let's return to the third sign, misaligned evolution. This one is dangerous because it doesn't feel threatening. You'll tell yourself, they're just doing their own thing. And sometimes that's true. But Machiavelli warned about what he called silent ambition, growth that isn't announced, isn't aligned, and isn't shared. It happens slowly, privately, and by the time you notice, the person isn't your ally anymore. They're your competitor with insider knowledge. This happened repeatedly in Florentine politics. Men who once served under a leader grew influential, built new networks quietly, and then made their move when the old power looked away. The betrayal wasn't sudden. The signs were there, but no one paid attention until it was too late. So how do you detect misaligned evolution before it strikes? You look for divergence in language. People who are about to outgrow you start using different words. They reference ideas that don't include you. Their tone shifts. They talk more about my goals, not our vision. They begin to speak like outsiders in a room they once helped build. It's subtle, but Machiavelli would urge you to notice, because by the time they say it directly, they've already decided. You test them by bringing the vision back to the center. Here's where I'm going. Are you still with me? And then you wait, not for their answer, but for their energy. Does it align, or does it hesitate? That hesitation is a fracture, and every fracture ignored becomes a break. Now, here's the bitter truth. Machiavelli never softened. Even when you detect these signs, most people do nothing. Why? Because betrayal feels personal, and when something feels personal, we hesitate, we hope, we remember better times, we wait for confirmation. But Machiavelli wasn't emotional, he was surgical. He wrote, "Men must be either caressed or annihilated." What he meant was that halfway loyalty is a liability. There is no maybe in allegiance. If someone around you is hesitating, posturing, or drifting, and you let it continue, you are giving betrayal the space it needs to take root. So you must act, not in anger, not in panic, but in silence, distance, observation, and if necessary, removal. You don't explain, you don't accuse, you don't try to change them. You simply restructure the room so that they no longer hold position. This is the Machiavellian way. Not cruelty, clarity. Because the most powerful act isn't striking the traitor after they betray. It's recognizing the betrayal before they know you've seen it, and making sure the knife never leaves their pocket. You don't punish betrayal after it happens. You prevent it from becoming possible. That was Machiavelli's core principle. Because in the chessboard of power, once someone has the position to strike, it's already too late. What separates the ruler who stays in control from the one who's overthrown isn't strength, it's anticipation. And most people don't anticipate. They assume loyalty because someone's been around for years, because they've shared wins, shared secrets, shared silence. But time does not equal trust, and history does not equal allegiance. In fact, the people most likely to betray you are the ones who've been watching the longest, who know your patterns, your pressure points, your flaws. Machiavelli once wrote, "A wise prince ought to be cautious in accepting the services of those who have shown themselves bold in offending others, for the same boldness may be used against himself." In modern terms, if someone betrayed someone else to join you, they'll eventually betray you to join someone stronger. So here's a fourth bonus sign few ever catch: loyalty without roots. You've seen this type before, the man who switches sides easily, who praises you today but trashed someone else yesterday. the one who rushes into your camp after being burned by another leader or group. They frame it as redemption, as a second chance. But Machiavelli would tell you, beware the soldier who abandoned his last commander, not because he was wronged, but because he is comfortable with shifting alliances. He may be loyal now, but only because you're currently winning. The moment your grip slips, he's gone. In The Prince, Machiavelli used the mercenaries of Renaissance Italy as a brutal lesson. He explained how princes who relied on mercenaries, soldiers who fight for money, not loyalty, always fell. Because mercenaries don't fight for the cause, they fight for the payout, and the minute danger outweighs profit, they vanish. Your modern mercenaries don't wear armor. They wear smiles. They speak your language. They play your game until your value drops. Then they switch. So how do you detect this kind of betrayal? Simple. You observe their history. Machiavelli taught that the best predictor of future behavior is not intent, it's precedent. So ask, how did this person arrive at your side? Were they driven by shared values, or by rejection from someone else? Did they build with you from the ground up, or did they arrive after you'd already won? Because the person who only joins once you're strong will be the first to flee once you're weak. The real lesson here? Loyalty is not about closeness. It's about cost. If someone has never had to pay anything for standing by you, they haven't proven anything. Machiavelli made it very clear. He who is not willing to suffer for your gain will never suffer to defend your loss. So test it, privately, intelligently. Create small costs, inconveniences, situations where loyalty doesn't come easy. Watch who still stands beside you. That's your real circle. Now let's address a dangerous misconception, one that gets powerful people destroyed over and over again. The belief that good intentions prevent betrayal. They don't. Machiavelli was unflinching in this. He saw rulers, generals, and citizens fall because they believed loyalty was based on shared morality, on kindness, on decency. But he wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers, not because they're evil, but because their loyalty bends to their interest. And when interest changes, so does allegiance." So here's a brutal truth. Someone can be kind to you, laugh with you, cry with you, and still betray you, not out of hatred, but out of calculated preference. You are not safe because they like you. You are only safe if they see no benefit in crossing you. That's why Machiavelli emphasized building structure over sentiment. He didn't trust people. He trusted systems, checks, balance, pressure points. He believed every powerful person should be surrounded by those who depend on them, not emotionally, but structurally, not with love, but with leverage. And that's the next strategy. Once you've spotted the signs, shadow obedience, overcommunication, misaligned growth, and loyalty without roots, you don't wait for betrayal. You move, you restructure, you remove options. In The Prince, he told the story of Agathocles of Syracuse, a man who rose from a private citizen to absolute power through ruthless moves. When his generals became too familiar, too equal, too comfortable, he eliminated them, not in hatred, but in necessity, because comfort breeds entitlement, and entitlement breeds betrayal. But today, you don't need to eliminate anyone. You just need to isolate the threat from the seat of influence. You reduce their access. You split their responsibilities. You decentralize their control. You don't let them grow unchecked. You don't let them operate in shadows. You expose them, not to shame them, but to strip their power to strike. Because here's the final Machiavellian principle for this part. You must build your power so that betrayal becomes irrelevant. Not because it won't happen, but because it won't work. Let them try, let them plot, let them smile behind your back. But if your structure is clean, your circle is tested, and your vision is unshakable, their betrayal will be like a blade striking iron. It won't cut, it will snap. The most dangerous betrayal is not the one you see coming. It's the one you excuse. You notice something, a small shift in tone, A sudden withdrawal, a moment of hesitation that wasn't there before, and your instinct tightens. But then, like most people, you suppress it. You rationalize. You say they're just tired or it's nothing, because acknowledging the truth would mean doing something about it. Machiavelli would call this softness, and softness is what gets rulers destroyed. He saw this pattern in history again and again. Good men, smart men, powerful men, undone not by enemies, but by their own unwillingness to accept that loyalty has an expiration date. In discourses, he recounts how the Roman Republic fell into tyranny not through sudden coups, but through gradual misalignment. Factions that once worked together slowly drifted apart, while leaders stayed blind, hoping the old alliances would hold. They didn't. The Republic collapsed because no one adjusted when the loyalty began to crack. So ask yourself, what are you currently ignoring? What signal are you downplaying because it's not a big deal? What shift in someone's behavior are you pretending not to see because calling it out would be uncomfortable? That is the point of rupture. That's where betrayal starts, in your silence. Machiavelli had no patience for those who ignored threats for emotional comfort. He believed in proactive disloyalty detection. He wanted leaders to be constantly testing, observing, unsettling, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because power is not protected by love, it is protected by predictive judgment. Here's one of his most brutal lines. A wise prince should not keep faith when doing so would be against his interest. At first glance, it sounds cold, but look closer. Machiavelli isn't glorifying betrayal. He's acknowledging that loyalty is circumstantial, that even the most trusted friend, advisor, or partner will turn if the incentive shifts far enough. Your mistake is thinking that loyalty is fixed. It's not. It moves with the winds of advantage. That's why he repeatedly warns, don't depend on affection, depend on position. Someone who is loyal to you because they have no better option is dangerous, because the moment they find one, they leave. But someone who is loyal because you've created a structure where betrayal costs them more than it gains, that's a person you can count on. So Machiavelli's solution was twofold. Detect shifting interests early. Make defection more painful than loyalty. And here's how you do that in real life. Let's say someone close to you is showing the first signs, the slight pullback, the lack of initiative, the overly polished communication. You don't confront them emotionally. You don't ask, "Are we good?" That's a weakness they can exploit. Instead, you introduce friction. You subtly shift responsibility. You tighten control over information. You limit access to decisions. You change their incentives. You create a world where, if they are loyal, they earn more. But if they defect, they lose everything. Not because you're punishing them, but because you're designing a system that makes betrayal illogical. Machiavelli saw this in military structure. He wrote about how successful rulers never allowed any single general or advisor to become so powerful that their betrayal would matter. He admired Ferdinand of Aragon for constantly rotating his alliances, keeping every power center guessing, never letting one faction grow too confident. It wasn't paranoia. It was architectural control. Power, in Machiavelli's mind, was not about intimidation. It was about designing human behavior through structure. Here's a real-world application. If you run a business, never give one partner all the control. Always build in redundancy. If someone's emotional behavior starts shifting, test their dependency. Pull one resource, delay one privilege, restructure one role. Observe how they react. Do they push back constructively, or do they withdraw further? Do they seek clarity, or do they get defensive? That response will tell you everything. Because here's what betrayal almost always looks like before it happens. Communication becomes vague. Praise becomes excessive, initiative stalls, independence rises quietly, and transparency vanishes. You'll notice they stop sharing things they used to share. You'll sense they're building something, but they're not telling you what. This is not paranoia. This is pattern. And Machiavelli's ultimate test for betrayal was simple. Does this person still benefit from your strength, Or have they started preparing for your weakness? If it's the latter, they're already gone, even if they haven't made the move yet. But here's where most people fail. They react emotionally. They get angry. They confront. They accuse. That's not the way. The Machiavellian move is silent recalibration. Don't explain. Don't argue. Just restructure. Shift the chessboard until the betrayer finds themselves isolated, exposed, irrelevant, without you ever saying a word. Because here's the deeper strategy. If you design your world so that betrayal is always a downgrade, they'll never take the risk. This is how you survive betrayal before it strikes. Not by hoping people stay loyal, but by making loyalty the smartest move they can make. And if they still leave, if they still cross you, let them. Because if you follow this correctly, by the time they betray, they'll have nothing left to gain. Once you've identified a potential traitor, once the signals are clear and your instinct is certain, the worst thing you can do is react impulsively. Betrayal demands calm. It demands precision. If you respond too quickly, you lose the advantage. If you respond emotionally, you lose the upper hand. Machiavelli wasn't just a strategist of power. He was a master of timing. He believed that a threat is most vulnerable when it doesn't know it's been discovered. That's when the betrayer is still acting, still revealing themselves, still believing they're invisible. In The Prince, Machiavelli described how Cesare Borgia handled betrayal not by confronting it immediately, but by allowing it to fully unfold until the evidence was undeniable, and the punishment could be both final and public. Why? Because exposure without execution only makes a traitor smarter. The lesson is this: observe longer than you act, not to tolerate, but to trap. If someone close to you is already on the path to betrayal, their ego will eventually drive them to overplay their hand. And when they do, you don't meet them head-on. You remove the terrain. You don't argue. You don't plead. You don't warn. You simply isolate their influence, restrict their information flow, rewire the power structure so they are out of position, and make them irrelevant before they even notice. This is the Machiavellian art of preemptive exile, removing the threat without a war. Let's make this even clearer with one of Machiavelli's favorite historical examples. Girolamo Savonarola, the Dominican friar who briefly ruled Florence after the fall of the Medici. He inspired loyalty through religious fear, and people followed him as a prophet. But once he began to lose favor with the Pope, he believed the people would remain loyal because they loved him. He was wrong. As Machiavelli wrote, "He who builds his power on the people must know how to change when the people change." Savonarola didn't. He clung to their love. He believed it would save him. And so, when the winds shifted and his enemies acted, he had no structure to fall back on, only sentiment. He was captured, tortured, executed, his ashes scattered in the Arno River. What's the lesson? Never rely on affection for protection. You must build structures that hold, even when trust does not. So, if you sense betrayal building, here's what you do. Don't cut them off immediately. That's noisy. That gives them a role to play, a justification, a stage. Instead, slowly fade them out by reassigning their duties, stopping the flow of information to them, introducing new trusted players beside them, redirecting your alliances subtly and making their presence first optional, then invisible. They will notice, but they won't react, not at first, because the intelligent betrayer doesn't panic until their position starts collapsing, and by the time they confront you, you'll already be in a world where they hold no leverage. This is what Machiavelli called the preemptive purge. Not a violent removal, but a structural collapse of someone's influence. You don't attack them. You erase the room they once mattered in. Now, let's go deeper. Machiavelli also advised rulers to make examples, but only when necessary and with finality. In his analysis of Roman leadership, he explained how the Republic maintained order not by soft discipline, but by decisive, memorable punishment when it was absolutely justified and visible. He wrote, "A prince must strike in a way that he does not need to strike again." That means if someone betrays you publicly, if the move is visible, the damage real, and the message dangerous, you must respond surgically and permanently. Not out of revenge, out of demonstration. You don't scream, you don't threaten. You remove them so cleanly, so undeniably, that no one else even considers playing the same game. Because power doesn't protect itself. It must signal danger. Quiet power is not always silent. Sometimes it must echo. So what does this look like in your world? Let's say someone betrays your business, leaks your ideas, steals your clients, poisons your network behind your back. You could retaliate emotionally, or, Machiavelli would advise, you cut their access, expose their weakness quietly, and use their name as a case study in why loyalty is everything. Not to shame them, but to fortify your position. You don't need to destroy people to win. You just need to make betrayal look like the dumbest move they ever made. And finally, Machiavelli teaches us that once a traitor is neutralized, you must erase the past. Not from your mind, but from the environment. In taking a state, the conqueror must do all injuries at once. What does this mean? It means once you act against betrayal, you don't hold on to fragments. Don't keep the betrayer's name on your lips. Don't revisit the wound. Don't keep the bridge half burned. You end the chapter entirely, because the presence of a known traitor, even in memory, invites mimicry. But the total disappearance of a betrayer, that signals something far more powerful. Loyalty is required, but betrayal is forgotten.